Brother Anderson. Oh, Brother Anderson. Good to see you. Sister Shropshire. Deborah Stanfield. Good to see you. Raquel Fields. Janetta. All right, Edie, how are you? How's Chuck doing? Please. Good evening, everyone. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've been on Wednesday night. I'm on paternity leave. You know, we've had a new one come in and to the house, and so you haven't really seen me much. But I just had to come on today. And the reason why is because I have some pertinent information to share with you guys about what's going on with this bill. And so I'll just wait for a few people to get on. Feel free to come on. I just need to share with you guys what's going on with this bill. If you're already listening, go ahead and share this video out. It's very important. If you live in Oklahoma City, and in particular, if you live on the northeast side of Oklahoma, share this out. If you're pastored by one of the pastors on the northeast side, share this video. I know Pastor Coleman has already sent a video out. Matter of fact, his just ended about maybe 5 minutes ago. And so I'm doing my due diligence, doing my part to do the same thing. Come on in. I'm supposed to be on paternity leave. We just had a newborn. We have a newborn. She's 3 weeks old. But I do need to share this information with you. I need to make sure that my volume is working. So give me 1 second. All right, we're good. I'm supposed to be on paternity leave, but I wanted to come and share this with you. So come on, log on. I will be looking for you guys in the chat as well. Hey, Sister Huggins. I'm not going to be doing Bible study tonight, y'all, but I do need y'all to stay on. I do need y'all to share this out. If you know how to like and share, whether it's a YouTube clip, because the YouTube is up, but also Facebook. So please share this out. I've got some pertinent information for you. If you would just come on in, I'm going to give y'all a few minutes. I pray everyone is well. But y'all, we've got some work to do. We've got some work to do. So as the title of the video suggests, first and foremost, this is about House Bill 1775, which is the bill that's talking about what they say critical race theory and what can be taught in schools, who's protected, those things. So we're going to be yes, thank you, Sister Huggins. You've encouraged folk to call. Y'all know that I've called. If y'all have seen the video, I got some more information for you. So y'all start tagging people in the chat. Do everything you need to do to get them onto this video to see it. Do everything that you need to do to get them onto this video. Tag people who you know need to hear this. Here's what happened today, guys. A number of us, black pastors, went to see Governor Stitt today. It was a last-minute meeting. Most of us had already emailed, called, made Facebook posts and Instagram posts and Twitter posts about our aversion to the bill. But we got a call today that we had a meeting with Governor Stitt. So we went. I can tell you who was all there, full disclosure, and they know we're some of us have decided to put this information out here like this. So we want you to know about it. I was there. Pop Reed was there. The assistant pastor at Fairview, which is Derek Walter, was there. Pastor and Senator George Young was there. Pastor Rones was there. Pastor Scobie, Pastor Coleman, and Dr. Coleman, his wife, were there. Pastor Douglas was there. And Pastor Bird was there. We all went to go see the governor today. Our only ask for today was that he would veto that bill, that he would veto the bill. Same thing that we've been asking people to do. We went up there hoping and praying that he would veto that bill. Now, you know that we know that that's not going to always happen. So let me just cut to the chase. When we got down to the end of it, we were spent an hour with him. At the end of that, the question was asked by Pop Reed. After all that we've said and all that we've done today, where do you stand with the bill? Are you going to veto it or not? His response was, I don't see anything wrong with this bill. After he said that, we got up and we walked out. I wanted to give you that ahead of time so you know that when we went in there, we went in to ask him to veto. He told us basically that he agrees with everything that's in that bill, which lends us to believe that he's going to sign it. Okay. So now let me start over from the beginning. We go in, and I just want to share this, and then I'm going to spend my time tonight. I'm going to tell you what happened, and then I'll do my own study with you guys real quickly about this bill and about what critical race theory is and intersectionality and what actual real scholars say about it. Okay, so that's my goal. Share this, send it out to people so that they know that this is what we're talking about tonight. I'm going to talk to you about what happened in the room. I'm going to talk to you about what the bill says. And I'm going to talk to you about what critical race theory actually is and how these knuckleheads on the Capitol Hill got it wrong. Okay, so y'all know, y'all got my 3 points and a close. That's what we're talking about. It's not Bible study, but here it is. We go into the room. All of us sit down. They come in. Who comes in with him? It was the governor. It was his chief of staff. And it was 2 staff members. 1 male, 1 female. The governor and the chief of staff sit down. The 2 staff members sit on the walls. They're taking notes. Pop Reed opens up and says, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. We're here to tell you that we think that you should veto this bill. Here's what he does. Here's how he treats us. I'm going to say it how I can say it. I have the bill in front of me. See, he gave it to us. First and foremost, he thought we didn't read it. So that lets you know what he thinks about how who we are and how intellectual we are. He thought we didn't read this before coming in here. He gives us this bill. He also gives us the Oklahoma Academic Standards for Social Studies. Highlighted, as you can see, as if we can't read. We sit down. And he says, well, I would like to talk about the bill. Let's start here. Now, I want you to notice this. Anybody who's been in my Bible study classes know that when you read a passage, and this is just anything, Bible, a book, a letter, a bill, anything, that if someone starts in the middle, what should you do? You should back up to see what they're missing, what they're taking out. Here we go. Sitting down. And Brother Clayton, if you could do me a favor, share this to our group. So we sit down. He starts. If you haven't seen this bill, there are 3 sections to the bill. The first section is the larger section, but the bill is only 1, 2, 3 pages. Really, not even that. 2 pages if you really condense it. Okay. Section 1 is talking about the law, and there are different subsections in Section 1. So in Section 1, he skips down to number 1 of Section 1. It goes Section 1, A1, A2, B1, and then so on and so forth. So we're in Section 1, B1. And here's what it says. This is where he wanted us to point our attention. No teacher, administrator, or other employee of a school district, charter school, or virtual charter school shall require or make part of a course the following concepts. A, one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. B, an individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. An individual we shouldn't teach that an individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partially because of his or her race or sex. We shouldn't teach that members of one race or sex cannot and should not attempt to treat others without respect to race or sex. That an individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his or her race or sex. An individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. Or that an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex, or that meritocracy, which is a political government by way of saying that you have earned it, right? That you are placed in a position by your merit, by what you do, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. Or traits such as hard work ethic or racist or sexist were created by members of a particular race to oppress members of another race. This is what he wanted us to say. Do we agree with these things? So he goes through, he begins to read those letters, right? A through H. Well, do you guys agree that that one race or sex is inherently superior to another, or that we shouldn't teach that? Do you agree that we shouldn't teach that an individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, and so on and so forth? Here's the problem. Here is the problem. He starts in the middle of the document, and he doesn't start at the beginning. I want to read to you what we would call in scholarship, if you will, the abstract of the document. I want you to listen to this. This is an act relating to education, prohibiting certain students within certain institutions from being required to engage in certain training or counseling, allowing for voluntary counseling, prohibiting orientation or requirement that presents any form of certain stereotyping or bias, directly promulgation of rules pursuant to certain act and subject to certain approval, prohibiting certain application, prohibiting employees of certain schools from requiring certain concepts to be part of a course, specifying concepts, directing promulgation of rules pursuant to certain act and subject to certain approval, providing for codification, providing an effective date, and declaring an emergency. Here's what it gets down to. Basically, what this law is about is basically regulating whether a school can or cannot teach your child about the real history of this nation and this state. And that by teaching it truthfully, that when someone gets upset about it, whether it's a child, a parent, whether it is someone who works there, a teacher, that by law, if he signs this, that it makes it illegal for you to teach certain aspects of education. Now, here's how they deal with this. They call it critical race theory. As we go through this time together, I'm going to show you how far from critical race theory this is. But furthermore, let me show you what kind of governor that we have. Some of you already know this. Some of you are unaware. Some of you had hoped that this had never happened and that this should not be. But I'm going to tell you, our governor is racist. And I'm going to say it just how I feel it and just how it is. He walks in. He tries to read this to us as if we have no education, as if we can't read for ourselves. And as we push back, here's one of the things that he says, because we said to him, by putting this into law, the real history of our country is at risk of not being taught. Not being taught. And we have a concern because the real history of our nation needs to be taught, and our state. One of the things that he said over and over again is that he wants to protect all of our citizens, all the youth. And his concern was that white children would go home and feel guilty after hearing some of this stuff taught in school. We would come back and we would raise a point about how some of this stuff doesn't make sense. Why do we need this bill when in our Oklahoma academic standards for social studies, you have to teach about Martin Luther King. You got to teach about Brown and Board of Education. You got to teach about the Montgomery bus boycott, desegregation of Little Rock Central High, all of these areas. But we're talking to him about the way things are taught. You and I are not dumb people. And I just want to talk to some people. We're not dumb. We know that what can be written can be nuanced in teaching. We know that there are plenty of schools in Oklahoma who gloss over this part of our history. So just because you have it written down don't mean you do a good job at it. That's the first thing. Two, we know that there's a big push around the country for states to pass these kind of laws. Remember, Trump September, November, put out this executive order to try to get critical race theory out of schools and out of conversations, and in particular, out of federal trainings. So now these states, and there's a few of them that are following suit. One of the states is Oklahoma. So we go in, we're talking. We have one individual that says, one of our pastors who's trying to get the governor to show a little empathy. We tried to tell him that when we looked at who actually passed this law, it was white legislators. That your Asian American Republican legislator voted no. That your black legislators voted no. That people of color who are in the legislature voted no. So this in essence is a bill that is heavily racist and biased, because they're in their feelings about what they feel when they have to hear that this nation started out racist, that this nation continues to perpetuate racism. Now, I don't know about you, but that ought to make you mad. For those of us who have been sleeping on all these issues, this ought to cause you to say something. These are deliberate. This is part of a overarching push to enact Jim Crow and Jane Crow-esque laws. Okay, we're looking through here. So I just want to talk to you about what I see wrong with this bill. First and foremost, everything. Everything is wrong with this bill, because the birth of this bill stems from their racism and bias. Everything about this bill stinks and reeks of Trumpism, white evangelicalism, racism. So even if it sounds okay, those of you who are in my Bible study, context is everything. Knowing what the person intended is everything. So guess what? I ran into that person today. The person who initially wrote this bill that got killed. But what happens in the legislature is that a bill can be killed, but elements of that bill can be placed in another bill that gets to the floor. So what happens is they took parts of the bill that this one person wrote. We ran into him. I'm so glad God set it up that we ran into him. And they placed it in this. This was not supposed to be a bill about this. This was supposed to be a bill about combat brain injuries and concussions in sports, and to ban gender diversity trainings in colleges. That's what it was supposed to be. It was used for that. It then became something to censor education. Now, for those of you teachers, and there was a few of you who I know personally, our church picked up, what was it, 3 years ago? Drove you to the Capitol. You should be standing with us this time. We do know that the superintendent of our school district is opposed to this bill. And I'll get to that in a minute. As we were in that room, it became increasingly clear that though as the chief of staff said, this was not a bill that the governor wanted. He wasn't actively pursuing this bill, but the way that he sure did support it, and the way that he was fighting for it in the room lets me know that he might not have had to follow after it or fight for it, but he sure gonna sign it because he does not understand us. And it is what it is. We've got to know that. It does not matter how many times he shows up on the Northeast side when Pastor Scobie, in the work that he's doing, passing out food to the community. It don't matter how many times he shows up for a photo op. It does not matter how many times he has a prayer service for the Tulsa race massacre. What this is showing you is that there is some disconnect. There is a willful attempt to stop the education of these young people. We have people at that table who have been Oklahomans all their life, and they'll tell you they never once heard about the Tulsa race riots. I'm so glad to know that I knew about them before I got here, years ahead of time. But there were people at that table, you heard me name the names earlier on, that didn't even know anything about the race riots. And here we have this bill. So I'm going to tell you what I think is wrong with it. First and foremost, Section 1A, point 1, it talks about that no student of an institution of higher education within the Oklahoma state system or higher education shall be required to engage in any form of mandatory gender or sexual diversity training or counseling, provided voluntary counseling shall not be prohibited. Any orientation or requirement that presents any form of race or sex stereotyping or a bias on the basis of race or sex shall be prohibited. What that says is that you cannot mandate diversity training for teachers, counselors, students. You know why people get in their feelings when we start talking about race? And you know why people get in their feelings when we start talking about what has happened to Black people, brown people, Native people here, gay people here, LGBT community? You know what happens, and the reason why they get upset is because they do not have diversity training. So the intent of the bill, as they say, is to protect people and to keep people from feeling discomfort. But you know what helps people navigate and manage discomfort? Diversity training. Training that allows you to see what cultural intelligence looks like. Training that shows you the intent of people through their cultural lens. Training that shows you how to show up in a classroom and teach when you have differing voices. How to counsel people who are not of the same culture as you. So if this bill from the very beginning dismantles that very mandate, you better believe all the other things are going to happen. That's why we got to back up and read this bill. Here's what else it says. It says that these teachers can't teach these concepts. One race or sex is inherently superior to the other race. Okay, when we start looking at, and y'all heard me read it earlier, when we start looking at what they're saying that we shouldn't teach, on face value, it is easy for us to say, you're right, we shouldn't teach those. But let me tell you, when we had two educators in that room who teach critical race theory and teach Black history every day, all day. You had Dr. Sherry Coleman, and you had Pastor Byron Coleman sitting in a room right next to each other, who said to the governor, what you are saying is wrong. The way this bill is worded is saying that we would be in violation by calling to attention the real fact and critique that there was a time, and there are still people who think that their race and their sex makes them superior than other people. They have to teach critical race theory to get to the heart of it. Do you think he listened to the experts in the room? One who has a doctorate in this area and teaches. The other who's been teaching it on the university, both of them on the university level for 20 plus years. Do you think he listened? No. When we talked to him about no one of color put their name behind this bill, he just looked as if he'd never seen it before. The problem with the bill is not simply the writing, but it's too broad. One. Two, you say it's supposed to be combating critical race theory. This has nothing to do with critical race theory. Can I take it to task? This is why you need well-informed pastors, preachers, and teachers. Here, I just want to talk to you real quick. I just want to bring this up for you. Okay. I'm reading this article, 8 states debate bills to restrict how teachers discuss racism and sexism. I'm reading it. It's written by Sarah Schwartz. It was on April 15th. Our state is named in one of these. Here's what I want to get at. Here we go. These bills are trying to oppose critical race theory without specifically stating critical race theory. And here's the other thing. When you ask them, what do they know about critical race theory? The original author of the bill that got shot down, and then his stuff got put into this one, we ran into him outside. You know, I asked him, what's critical race theory? He wants to talk about Marxism. He does not raise the tenets of critical race theory. Neither does Governor Stitt. Governor Stitt, and I quote, said he does not want white kids, white children going home feeling like they are being harmed by what is being taught, that they feel guilty. That's what he said. He told us, and I quote, I don't see anything wrong with this bill. Great. Allison, which is one of my members, and she's always on it. She says, now OK is trying to flat out violate mandates for licensure and accreditation for certain degrees. Check this. For instance, OU will have to shut down its social work program because the national accrediting body, the CSWE, won't let you issue a social work master's degree without talking or taking a cultural diversity class. Notice how this bill is going to affect what we do here. So this particular thing, here's the thing. It says, and I'm going to read a couple of snippets out of this, a couple of articles, so that we can now learn what critical race theory is and how it should be applied. First and foremost, critical race theory was initially put together by legal scholars. It started out in the law field, because what they noticed is when they went to go and help decide a case or argue a case for someone or against someone, it was as if there was like this blind blanket justice that did not put into consideration how race, economics, sex, gender played a role. and how we see people, how our biases get in the way of doing right by people. And so one individual, this one person mentioned Kimberly Crenshaw, this guy who wrote this bill, and he kind of misquotes her. He says that she helped to write critical race theory, but she also helped to do intersectionality, which is what we also use. What does it mean to be black and male, or black and female? What does it mean to be black, female, and 70, or black, female, and 20? What does it mean to be black, female, and able-bodied, or differently able-bodied? What does it mean? This is what intersectionality means. Critical race theory is isolating that one element in particular to show us that race runs through every facet of our world. In particular, the West, in more particular, the United States, and how that idea continues to be perpetuated right now. So she, yes, did talk about and help to construct critical race theory. It started out in law. It went on into other areas. As you can see, social work, sociology, and theology, which is probably why some of their churches don't teach it either, is because they haven't been in a program that will. Here's what a professor says. We're not talking about these legislators that don't have that critical understanding. A professor of education policy, okay, and organization and leadership at the University of Illinois, who has edited several books on critical race theory. I did ask them, the person who wrote it, and I asked them what they were reading. What did they actually look at? Here's a book on critical race theory. She says that in education, she says that these lawmakers completely misunderstand what this practice is. We're talking about all these folks who are trying to pass these laws, including ours. I want you to write this down. I know y'all probably on for Bible study. We're not having Bible study. I'm coming out of paternity leave just for today, just to talk about this. Critical race theorists would say absolutely that people shouldn't be discriminated against by virtue of their race or sex. They would say that. We don't locate individuals as responsible for structural racism. Dixon said instead, she said scholars acknowledge that racism informed the country's founding principles. 3/5 compromise. I mean, all you got to do is look at, for instance, Thomas Jefferson. If I'm not mistaken, let me get to where I'm going. Here it is, Thomas Jefferson's excerpts from Notes of the State of Virginia. He says, and I quote, "I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only, that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstance, are inferior to the whites in the endowment both of body and mind." I want you to let that sink in. What critical race theory gets at is that at the very heart of the structures that we built and the structures that we maintain, that this thought process, that there is a caste in the United States runs true, and that caste runs right through race and also economics. So, for instance, the laws that were originally passed in this world, right, in this area, that talk about, for instance, who is white and who is black. There are laws. You can go look them up. Virginia had laws. Matter of fact, it came initially from that area. That here's what we mean by white. And this whole concept of whiteness has evolved over time. It used to be a certain group of Europeans that were considered white, and then others. So, for instance, like, if I'm not mistaken, the Irish were considered non-white and not black. And as time went on, and black people and poor whites, poor Irish, poor non-white whites got together to fight against those who considered themselves white and rich, they would enact new laws both on the state level and the federal level to then say, this is what white is. This is how we define whiteness. This is how we define black. This is how we define native. So that those who were not white at one time, the Irish, become white and now fight for white interest. Critical race theory helps us to see that. There's nothing wrong with us doing that. Critical race theory shows us that the founding principles of the country are just informed by racism. Here's another. For example, teaching the legacy of slavery and its far-reaching impact on the United States today is not about assigning blame to the students in front of you. It is actually about inspiring them to be better and do better. You cannot do better if you're not going to tell the truth. And what we heard in that room was that Governor Stitt is okay with our students not hearing the truth and not being engaged. I can go and bring my daughter, and I can tell my daughter that it is wrong to treat someone who looks a certain way wrong. I can go and tell my daughter that that the way that she's treated a person, or the way that we have treated a person in the past, was wrong and we shouldn't do it. That's what critical race theory is saying to us. That by doing critical race theory, we're saying, look at what we have constructed. Some of it we have dismantled, but not much of it. And in order for us to live into a more perfect union, we have got to do the real critical work of seeing what we have created. And for some of us, what we've had to endure. Here's some other things. Decades of scholarship and testimony from people of color have long demonstrated the persistent racial bias and inequalities and inequities that exist in the U.S., from education to medical care to housing. Still, some legislators reject the idea that racism and sexism are still forces that shape American society and don't want teachers telling this to students. Think, for instance, about how housing and where one lives is determined and was determined by redlining. And although that's not technically on the books anymore, there are other ways that they do it. Let's talk about how some communities, black spaces where we live, were also considered less valuable than white spaces. Let's talk about the fact that suburbs were created to boost the value of white dollars and white houses and white land because they didn't want black people and brown people living next door to them. That's what that means. We have been saying from the very beginning that these inequities are here. We know that they have successfully in times and unsuccessfully passed these kind of laws. 1950s, the southern states, somewhere between 1920s and 1950s, southern states led successful efforts to ban instruction in evolutionary biology. We know that. Some of you are recipients of that kind of education. We know that in the 1940s, the 50s, and the 60s, state legislators and local school boards tried to prevent teachers from examining capitalism through a critical lens. In other words, we're going to be capitalists, and we're not going to talk about how it also inadvertently enfranchises people. How that in the system of capitalism, there are some people that just get hurt. And the reason why they were doing that is because there was a fear of socialism and communism. You couldn't even talk about it. We know that. Some of you have lived through this. This is no different, brothers and sisters. Beloved, this is no different. That's just one article. Let me pull another one. There's an article from Oklahoma Politics. Educators speak out against the bill that restricts teaching critical race theory in Oklahoma. The theory explained. Again, you can find it. You just go find it. I just want to help you. This bill, what it's trying to say is that Critical race theory is harmful. If you read through the bill, you'll notice that it never mentions critical race theory. So if you're going to do it, be bold about it first and foremost. What critical race theory talks about are the policies and the law. The focus is on the discrimination itself and the hurt that discrimination caused those people. Okay. Now, there's an individual who his name is Lemon. He was a native of Edmond, an Oklahoma State University graduate. He's a professor of ethnic studies at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. He teaches critical race theory. You would think that you would listen to someone who teaches it. By the way, I got a chance. God, thank you, because you let this man walk right by us. The guy who wrote the original bill, and I asked him, did you talk to someone who knows this information? Well, no, I just read. I just read somewhere. Oh, do you know what critical race theory is? Marxism. No, it's not. He then went on to say, you don't think that our nation is, how did he put it? Perfect? My response, no. Why would anybody think that our nation is, if it was perfect, we never would have had to add amendments? I want you to think about this. This is just a critical thinking class today. Guys, I want y'all to get mad. Call. Here's what I can tell you. He gonna sign it. He's not gonna veto. So now what are you gonna do? How are we gonna mobilize? So let me keep going. Critical race theory does not teach that people of different skin colors are better. This is what this man says. When I teach it, I don't focus on how people feel about other people of color. I focus on the actions that the laws and policies prescribe. I want you to notice this. Critical race theory is showing you how the laws pan out for different people of color. Critical race theory, at the very heart of it, is trying to expose the fact that when people come to the table with this color blindness, they're writing laws from their own culture, not realizing, some of them and others realizing, that it's going to adversely affect people of color. Okay, here is what Dr. Sean McDaniel, who is our Oklahoma City Public School Superintendent, and we know there are times where we agree with him, there are times where we don't. There are times where we agreed with the decisions to modify and significantly reduce schools. There are times where we didn't. We know that. We're not going to agree with him all the time, but look here. Yeah, we met with him, Brother Cubitt. We did. And I'm not pleased. And I'm just going on record to say he's going to sign it. He does not understand black people. He does not understand what we're talking about. He does not want to understand. We had educators in there to tell him. We had pastors to appeal to empathy. We had pastors to appeal to his Christianity, which, by the way, we need to stop doing. We had pastors who tried to reason. It's not going to happen. Anyway, our superintendent, here's what he says. And I quote, he goes on record to say this. HB 1775 appears to be a solution. Watch the words, y'all. Those of you who go to my Bible study know words matter. Y'all should circle appears, write down appears. Appears to be a solution looking for a problem where it does not exist. OKCPS follows the guidance of OSDE. Teaching, which is the Oklahoma State Department of Education. Teaching the state-determined Oklahoma academic standards, which we can dispute those later. That's a whole nother conversation. But they at least follow those, which I showed you earlier. Talk about these issues. Talk about Montgomery bus boycott. How can you talk about that without talking about the issue of race? And that there was And let's just be honest, because that's not that long ago. There's still people who were in the legislature or working around the legislation that opposed the bus boycott, that tried to get them people hurt, that tried to get Clara Luper shut down, that are still working in the system. So you can't tell me that people aren't still racist. They're still there. They've trained a whole nother generation to think the same way. Here's what he says. They go by the academic standards. We believe it is important that we continue to learn both about and from our past in order to build an enlightened and resilient future. As we do this, OKCPS will continue to provide a welcoming and inclusive learning and work environment. We stand firmly by our vision for equity board policy and remain committed to creating, building, and sustaining an environment that embraces racial, ethnic, cultural, and socioeconomic diversity. I wish he would also add in their gender, and I wish he would also add in their sexuality, because you have them in your midst as well. And that provides equitable access to high standards of educational success for all students with the intention of closing achievement gaps, particularly for student groups with the greatest academic needs in the district. Here is what our superintendent says. Listen to the pride that he puts in the teachers. Now, some of them, he misplaces some pride in some of them. Some need to go. But I can tell you, let me shout out DeAndre Foster at Douglas, who is a wonderful teacher. And this law will mess up what he teaches in his class. We have teachers across the district who we trust to make decisions, sometimes life and death decisions, on behalf of our students each and every day. Surely, we can continue to trust our educators to guide these difficult yet necessary conversations with our students inside of their classrooms. OKCPS strongly encourages Governor Stitt to veto HB 1775. Oh, I'm breaking up. Let me blame it categorically on the devil. Let me go back and say this. Our superintendent says that our teachers should be able to teach this information, that he has faith in our teachers. I want to shout out one. There's more. I want to shout out one, DeAndre Foster. I want to shout out his cousin, Miss Hubbard, who is there teaching not only history, but they also teach in the Law Academy at Douglas, so that these students, who everyone talk bad about at Douglas, be talking about how they can't learn, how they don't do. But here's the studies. The studies have come out. You can go verify. The best teachers are at Douglas. They've done the study. You can go look at it. The people who teach according to the standards, the folks who are making sure that our students are learning, the folks who are making sure that they're hitting all of the metrics, they're all at Douglas. And all we got to do, we always talk bad about them. But our best teachers, the ones that are doing it the way they're supposed to, providing critical engagement, are at Douglas. So that's from the superintendent. Let me go on. There's just one more. I got an article. This is from a PhD student. Let's say it again. Type it in there. PhD student. This is from 2009. So he's already finished. His name is Nicholas Daniel Hartlip. He was a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And he lays out for us the tenets of critical race theory. Now, I want to lean these up against what he says. There are 5 tenets, basic tenets of critical race theory. Firstly, racism is ordinary. What it's talking about is the way that the United States has been put together, that it works, that it has historically functioned, and that it continues to function because of stuff like this. Racism is ordinary. The overall ethos of majority culture promotes and promulgates a notion of color blindness. We hear this on the news all the time, and meritocracy, color blindness. We see no color. We want everyone to have an equal chance. It's almost like putting together John Rawls' theory of what is that? The veiled. You come to the table with, I can't remember the term, but basically you come to the table and you don't bring your particularities. Okay, that if we're going to move together in a world, in political theory and in other theories, that we come to the table veiled. We don't bring the particularities of our life. That's color blindness. And color blindness does not work. Because who's determining what color blindness looks like? And in these United States, yet to be, and in this state, the supermajority is determining what color blindness is. And the supermajority does not want to deal with race. Meritocracy is the concept, is the governing, where you are placed in a governing position because of your because of what you can do, because of your traits, because you are able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Same thing that Trump said when he got $1 million from his father to start his company. That ain't pulling yourself up by bootstraps. It's not pulling yourself up by bootstraps to steal land from First Nations. It's not pulling yourself up by bootstraps to steal black folks from Africa, have them work your land, release them, and act laws against them to keep them from advancing. Like, that's not pulling yourself up by your bootstrap. So if you're going to talk about pulling yourself up by your bootstrap, how about you just give all that money back, all that land back you took, and you start over like you had us doing? First thing, the notion that racism is ordinary. It's not something that just happens every once in a while. Racism is the very fiber of this nation. I want you to consider what they meant when they said, "we the people." Might as well get this lesson in now before they outlaw it. We the people. In order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, we ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. But as they defined it, we the people were land-owning white males who could vote. And that in order for us to really get our census going, right? The census, some of us were 3/5 of a person. So that certain states, because they knew they weren't going to have the population, could have more votes. They didn't build off themselves. They built off us. The second idea is the idea of interest convergence, that they will only help if it benefits them. So I want you to see this. And so I want to say this publicly, because I've already had my conversation with Pastor Scobie. We had the conversation. So I just want to say this. The perfect example is when Bice, Stitt, the Binkowskis come over here because they think on the Northeast side is what I mean over here, and say, we want to help you do this and we want to help you do that. But the one time that we asked. Pastor Scobie was there with us. Pastor Scobie was upset that Stitt did not side with us. This is what it means when it says idea of interest convergence. That the only way they see it a benefit is if they benefit from it. Then the other one is social construction of race. It is the idea. Critical race theory deals with the heart of the fact. You talk about color blindness. It's critical race theory that gets you to understand that race was constructed. That there is only one race, and that's the human race. But there is ethnicity, and that there is a way that the dominant group passed laws, determined science, developed sociology and economics around the notion that some people were better than others because of the color of their skin. What critical race theory suggests to us is that it is all constructed. And just like it was constructed, you can dismantle it. But in order to dismantle it, you got to deal with what was constructed. Where it gets to the heart of this is when the intersection between people who are pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and those who aren't, they're just not doing it, intersects race, intersects the construction of race, where you had people who would say that people who were black were like animals, didn't have the capacity to be human, that all that they could do was be a workhorse and a mule. And when they wouldn't do the way the master wanted them to do, they could be beat. What it shows us is that that was constructed. And this whole meritocracy, this idea that you can pull yourself up by, you get what you get by your merits, is a lie. If merit means that you can lie to get what you want, that you can steal to get what you want, sure. But when you say that you can't be lazy, but down through the years you have told people that to be black is to be lazy, that to be on welfare and be black is to be lazy, we got a problem. When we look across our state and we see that our black schools lack resources, and you want to put more resources to charter schools and private schools, when we got black schools who are trying to do the work for our students, and you won't give them the money, and then you want to call them lazy and unable to learn and inept, that's meritocracy through the lens of racial construction. Because when you look at the sciences that were constructed down through the years, blacks were considered animalistic, that their brains were smaller, that they didn't have the capacity to feel, that they didn't have the capacity to do anything other than be a workhorse, that they're expendable, which also is what helped to drive how we did science and medicine, which is why they'll try stuff on us. By the way, that is not for me a way to say don't get that vaccine. No, if you can, if you've done your research, if you feel comfortable, get the vaccine. But you also got to know that there are times where, why is it that our black mothers will die at a higher rate in the hospital by giving birth than whites? Why is it that our communities are considered food deserts? This is what we're talking about with socially constructed. Okay, now, as I go forward, the idea of storytelling and counter storytelling. If I have the book with me, I'll show it to you. I don't know if I have it with me, but there is a wonderful book by Lee Ann Bell. Lee Ann Bell. Okay, Lee Ann Bell. And if I'm not mistaken, let me look it up to make sure I get it right. But I believe it says it's storytelling for social justice. Lee Ann Bell. Storytelling for social justice, connecting narrative and the arts in anti-racist teaching. What it gets to, this book, it's a book that I use in my dissertation, which y'all pray for me. The 14th, I should be defending. It teaches us how to understand the dominant story and the way that it is used. And then it shows you other ways to tell the story so that you get at the truth. So it gives you a system of telling the stories of America, of race, of science, of medicine, of housing discrimination, of banking, so that the dominant story, here's the dominant story in this one, that students will feel discomfort and guilt. That's the dominant story. Here's the alternative story. 400 years, you have made a whole people group feel discomfort and guilt. For 400 years. What does it mean for a student now, without even this law going through, to feel discouraged from going to college because all their life they've heard that they're not smart enough? Okay. The notion that whites, this is number 5, have actually been recipients of civil rights legislation. Critical race theory will let us know that white people have benefited from civil rights legislation when they say they have not. In particular, when we talk about affirmative action, white people, by and large, benefit from affirmative action more than people of color. So that was that. That's that one. Let me see. Do I have anything else that I want to share with you? We've got to be vigilant. Family, we've got to be vigilant. The reason why this bill is horrible is because it's showing us that our legislatures do not want to critically engage the problem of this nation and this state. They are riding a wave started by Trump and continuing on through our education. They are telling us that we really do not matter. I told the guy who wrote the bill when I ran into him today, because again, God's providence is amazing. We were leaving the Capitol. We were already mad. And there he goes trying to politic. I wish I remembered this man's name. Cherie, if you remember it, type him down there about why he thinks this bill is good. And I stopped him and I told him that I wish you had come to us to talk to us about this before you put this mess out here. Because what you're saying it's doing is not what it's doing. He tried to tell me what critical race theory was, and I told him, what have you read? He tried to tell us that the United States has not been racist. 3/5 compromise, laws that are on the books. We can look at it historically, that define what race is and who has a chance at life here. Laws that allowed people to get away with murder. Military used against its own citizens to bomb a whole town. I'm tired of them calling it Tulsa Race Massacre. Greenwood. Let's name exactly where you hit. Greenwood. And the fact that you don't want to deal with it because you don't want to have blame placed on you about what your ancestors did, or maybe they weren't your ancestors, but you you think that because everyone sees you as white, that we say you're the problem. You are the problem when you do not want to address what has happened and how those problems still are around. We're not saying that you enslaved us. What we are saying is that what we are saying is this, that when you do not dismantle what continues to harm people of color, you are complicit with the problems of now. And let's just be honest. I'm going to just say it how I say it. You probably would have been complicit then. That's what it is. I'm against not mandating diversity training. I was a student on SMU. Can I tell you what happened at SMU in Texas? And their seminary is liberal. The rest of the campus is conservative. Let me tell you what the conservative undergraduates was doing to students of color, Muslims, to gays. They would drive up and down the boulevard, what we call the boulevard. I'm just talking about Texas. You know, your cousins, Oklahoma cousins, screaming nigger. They would say derogatory terms, which I'm not going to say against these other groups because I'm not in those groups. They can tell their story. They would string up nooses. They would throw rocks at students. And the same students that were doing those things, and the students who said something needed to be done about it, when we mandated diversity training for all incoming students, they got in a tizzy. When I think about what has happened here in Oklahoma, students on a bus singing songs, racist songs. When I think of people being called nigger on campuses around this state, when I think of the ways in which we have allowed money to go to certain schools, but not to go to our oldest school in the state, high school, and then we wonder why we need to mandate it, mandate diversity training, mandate teaching about it. It's because deep down, you're not for all people. You're not. There's no need to pass this law. It's none. We should talk about the history of this state and people in this state, people in this country, who thought that because they were white and male, that they were superior to others. Because you know what? There are still people who operate in that understanding. I'm going to put it to it this way. I'm going to do it this way. Completely different subject, and I'm almost done, guys. I've been on here an hour. That's all. I just wanted to give you this. I've been on here an hour. When we talk about training in churches and nonprofits, in schools, about child abuse, one of the things that we do is we have background checks to see if there's an abuser. The other thing that we do is we have certain questions that are asked in the interview that, depending on how they speak, gives you a certain understanding about who they are and what they do. To get past that, there is ongoing training about how to recognize whether someone is grooming a young child, how to recognize and what to do when someone starts breaking small rules, like texting children after a certain time, like trying to isolate particular students away from others, letting students sit on your lap, things like that. And that all of those measures help to weed out perpetrators. Can I tell you? racism, sexism, homophobia, all of those need the same kind of training. That we have to constantly talk about how to recognize perpetrators. So let me say it like this. Here's how you can recognize a perpetrator about race. They do stuff like this. They will sign bills like this. They will say things like this, that we don't want white children to feel guilty about what happened in the past. We don't want them to be uncomfortable. They will come into a room and try to get pastors on board by saying, well, let me know what you don't agree with, and treating us like we're stupid, when we know good and well that this law is written so broadly that it will give the legislators the teeth that they want to do what they want with. It is time. It's time for us to say no more. I want you to stay tuned. I know Pastor Coleman said something about it earlier on his live. Go over to his Fifth Street Baptist Church. I know it was on there. That in the coming weeks, you're going to see some information come out from those of us who were there, who went up there today. I just want you to know, not one person in that room pandered to Governor Stitt. Not one person in that room said, well, Governor, you have a point. No, we said, Governor, you wrong. And all this stuff you've been doing, all this politicking with the Tulsa massacre, race massacre, all this praying you've been doing, it means nothing. Because when you pass this, you just revealed your heart. I'll say this. Proximity to power and whiteness will be the death of us all. So we got to do something different. Let's hold them accountable. God bless you. I pray that this has lit a fire. If you got some questions, reach out. I'll do the best I can to answer them. If you're still on the fence, I want you to ask yourself, what would happen to my child? I got a newborn and I got a 4-year-old. They're my daughters. I got 2 girls. What would happen if we cannot have our students critically engage the wrongs of our past, our present, and our future? Let's get to work.